Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of All In with Coach Bill Hart. And this is just fun for me because I'm going to be introducing you to a friend of mine that I think we've known each other for, I think we figured out the other day, about 25 years or so. And we used to work together in a very different environment years ago. I think he was 12. And we have remained friends and connected over the years, and now play golf occasionally. And it's just so fun for me to be able to introduce you to Khai Mcbride. So without any further ado, welcome, Khai.
Hey, Bill. It's really fun being here. I could have been 12. I could have been 46. I'm Asian. You don't know whether I'm 17 or 76.
Such
Who
a good
knows?
point. That's really an unfair competitive advantage.
I'm like the vampire that just keeps going in that movie. I don't know whatever that vampire movie is,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
But it feels forever. It was different times, definitely. And I feel like we've gone through a lot in business and in industry together. So I mean, to see where we are today compared to where we were before, do we have a bunch of stories? And I think half of our knowledge is just making it through that.
Totally. Yeah, it's such a great observation, man. So here's something that I've learned about interviewing, and it would be natural for me to go down a path right now about kind of talking about your background and how we used to work together and all that. And I here's my belief. I believe that while people might be gracious about that, I don't think they really care.
Yeah.
I don't think they really care. So if you want to know, reach out to Khai, reach out to me, over a beer, a cup of coffee, a round of golf, happy to have that conversation. I think what they care about is what you've learned that might be able to benefit them, Khai. So the only thing that I'm going to say in terms of setup, and you're welcome to go wherever you like with this, is you and I were on a virtual conference the other day together. And man, I was listening to you, and while I have been aware of what you do, Khai, and how you do it, I didn't have nearly as much granularity and detail about your philosophy and your approach to coaching. And it even came up on the panel. Somebody said something, somehow the question came up about competition, and you and I were both like, oh man, I just don't think you see it the way we see it. Like, we don't view it that way. I don't view Khai as a competitor. He doesn't view me as a competitor. That would imply scarcity, and there's only so much business to go around. And if there's 40 marbles and Bill's got 21 and Khai's got 19, that's not fair. That's not how we view this, man. It's abundance, and there's plenty of people that we can serve. And the truth of the matter is we serve them differently. So Khai, if you were going to help somebody understand your business, how you're structured, and your philosophy for coaching, how would you describe that?
My coaching is three categories. Okay. And the first category I think is the most important category. And it was really what set the tone for how I do business and how I coach and everything that I do. And that first category is having an entrepreneurial mindset. Okay, an entrepreneurial mindset. I coach the mortgage industry. The reality is that I've coached other industries too. I've helped manufacturers, distributors, financial planners, jewelry people, jewelry store owners. But now I primarily coach the mortgage industry just because it's a niche market for me and what I've decided to do. But no matter what, in all industries, it's the entrepreneurial mindset. And I was introduced to that mindset really, really early on from one of my mentors, Bill Hillestead, who is our mutual friend who introduced us together. And the very first book he told me to read was called The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. And it's still my #1 business book of all time in terms of this is the starter book for everything that you're ever going to have to do.
Nice.
And it's a really simple book about a baker who decides she's really good at baking. So she's going to open up her own bakery one day. But then she realizes over time, all she does is she sits in the back and bakes and she slaves. And it's cool because she's self-employed, but the more orders that she gets, the more she has to bake. And then she realizes that she can't leave her bakery because she has to fill those orders. And so she's self-employed, but she's not a business owner. Okay. Exactly. A business owner, she has to get to the point where she steps out of her business and she hires bakers. And I know what it is. Everybody always says, well, how do I trust somebody to bake? Well, in the baking world, it's really easy. You create a recipe, and that's called a process. And once you create a recipe and you create a process, then people can bake for you. And now she can focus on the other things like growing the business and management. And so I think that everybody in different industries, yes, there's going to be a point where you're actually going to do the craft. Like I actually coach people too, but you have to set aside time to be the entrepreneur and to step aside and look at your business that way. And one of the things that I see as an entrepreneur is having an abundance mindset, because the way entrepreneurs look at things, and this is very backwards for people to understand, and it's backwards because usually prior to getting into your own business, you had a job, okay? And when you have a job, you make $50,000, and then you say, well, I would love to make 70, and I would love to make 80, and then I would love to make 100. You want to sort of escalate and step yourself up that way. The true entrepreneur sees business a little bit differently. You know, in the loan industry, we fall into that trap too. You do certain production, you want to keep raising, but that's no different than asking for raises and promotions.
Sure.
So a true entrepreneur looks at it from abundance because they ask themselves, what is the opportunity in the market that I can capitalize on? What is this market giving me? And every year it's completely different. And what that allows you to do is that allows you to see it from a bigger picture, and that allows you to also stay on top of everything and adjust to the markets.
So
right now,
rather than being myopic and like so focused in on what is, you sort of miss what could be.
What could be, right? You look at all the opportunities in life. And here's the thing about this mindset too. This mindset is also just life.
Yep.
You know, we're so into where we are, and we start from here. We don't see what's possible in the big world. And here's a perfect example that I read the best article about 5 years ago. For those of you who know the pro skateboarder Tony Hawk, who I grew up with, and I think if you didn't, you still know the name.
Sure.
He was being interviewed one time with legend Rodney Mullen. They were sitting together, and it was like, I forgot who the interviewer was, but he said, Tony, you're legendary in being the most innovative person in creating tricks. Were in doing those tricks for the first time, was it more a mental challenge or a physical challenge because of the falling and everything else? And he said definitely mental, because here's why. When you see a pro skateboarder jump 10 feet, what happens is the amateur skateboarder that only jumps 2 feet, all they see is that gap. And all they see is how to rise up into that gap. But another pro skateboarder will see that 10-foot jump, and they simply ask, I could do that. How fast and what's the launch angle? That's it.
Wow.
How fast and what's the launch angle to get to that? They're not worried about where they are.
Yeah.
They're worried. They're thinking about what could be.
So good.
And then Rodney Mullen says, yeah. And then there's Tony. He said, well, if that's the launch angle, if I increase it a little bit, I can go 12 and go above everybody. So when you look at the market and you look at your business, ask yourself what is possible.
Which is
so right
essentially now, like Elon Musk, right? And Jeff Bezos, right? It's like, isn't that every great entrepreneur's story?
Yes. Steve Jobs. You know, Tony Say with Zappos.
Yeah.
What is possible? And when you start to look at what is possible, you realize that there is so much that you can live in abundance. Here's the reality with our business. Well, in terms of the loan officer side, I know you work with non-loan officers too, but I don't know what the number is, but I have to say there's like 100,000 loan officers. Okay. Sure. Now, before we started this, you and I said, as an individual coach, the most we ever really want to coach is maybe 30, 40 loan officers. Yeah. I have a slightly, larger company because I have coaches. So I could go anywhere to 100 if I really wanted to. What percentage of that is of 100,000? Like, what market share is that? Right. Secondly, how many mortgage coaches are there? Not enough to cover the whole 100,000.
Sure.
Not even close. And if you talk about really the good ones, it's probably less than 2 handfuls. So what's our competition? Eight other people for 100,000 loan officers.
Right.
The abundance is crazy, right? And so you ask yourself, what is the market giving? I think we all have different niches for that reason. That's why I don't see you as my competition, because I can literally say, I'm going to pick this niche of people, and it's completely different than where you are, this niche over here of other people.
For sure.
And then even looking at the times, we're in this quarantine era. And how many Zoom meetings have you done? I mean, we already do it for work, but we're not communicating people.
Yeah.
So now ask yourself the question, like maybe if you're a financial planner out there or a loan officer or an attorney, are you using Zoom, right, to take advantage of the market in your business? Because here's why. If I told you to use Zoom 2 years ago, it was like this obscure thing. Sure. And then like, I don't know, people don't know that. But now that every single person, on the face of the earth has downloaded it, what's the opportunity there to not only connect with your clients better,
Yep.
but can you expand your market? Maybe go
Absolutely.
outside of your local market, outside of your city, outside of your state, outside of the country, right? And you have to look at what is available. And once you start to realize that, then your goal of 100 clients or whatever that is seems really, really small, and Bill doesn't end up being my competition.
So at the time that we're recording this, Khai, forgive me, I know you saw me looking off camera because it's because I was looking for an email. Here's a great example of that. We are, as we're recording this, it's April 24th, and wherever, depending on where you are in the country, some of it's being opened up, some of the restrictions are being relaxed, some aren't. But what we know is we're going to be wearing masks for a while, right? Going to be wearing masks. So I have ordered, I don't even know how many at this point, probably 8, maybe 12 different masks from 3 different sources, all of whom, when I follow up, are like, well, we're still in the manufacturing and we'll send you a notice when shipping, and even UPS is delayed. And so it's like, okay, so it's still going to be a while, which we're not used to, right? We're used to 24, 48 hours, right? So this morning I see a Facebook ad, you'll appreciate this, Facebook video goes by. It's called Let's Print LA. And it's a guy that owns a t-shirt company in LA, and he's got these soft t-shirt material masks, right? And he's talking about it. And he said, and here's the thing, we're shipping them within 48 hours. Boom, I immediately ordered, because that guy found a niche. To your point, it's like, you know what? That's not being served. There are people, you've seen it. There are these ridiculous Photoshop masks that don't even exist that people are advertising, right? So that it's a mock-up of an idea. And so there's tons of this. I guarantee you there is so much money flowing into the mask world right now. And this guy just came across, nice friendly face. He said, hey, we got him, we ship within 48 hours. Boom, niche, right? So good.
The difference between an inventor and an entrepreneur is that an inventor says, I'm going to create this thing because I've got this crazy idea and I hope people like it. And if you treat your business that way, I hope people like me, I hope people think. The entrepreneur comes from the opposite side. What do people need? Because I'm going to make what they need.
That
right?
is such
they
a
look
great
at it from the opposite.
Khai.
How many inventors have inventions? You just look at it like, I don't need that.
Totally.
But if you do the opposite, and so when I help people look at their businesses, I ask them, what does the market need? And do you have the capability of providing that and creating that? And if you do, you put that together and you can price it.
I've never heard that distinction before. I love that. So, Bud, let's talk about the world where you spend most of your time now. And if you're in another business, like, run it through that filter and, get the value. But I know one of the things that you talk about, because I went to your site and I downloaded a couple of things, I think there, but somewhere it was either in the download or it was on the website, but you had kind of the different levels, the different tiers that you serve, right? And so when we think about that E-Myth approach, Michael Gerber refers to it as the Mcdonaldization of business. I tend to use Chick-fil-A because it's a little friendlier example that people actually like, but it's the same thing, right? It's like, okay, so somebody pulls up, the bell rings inside, the 17-year-old kid with skin trouble inside Chick-fil-A, when you say thank you at 48 or 65 or whatever age, they don't say what most 17-year-olds say, which is no problem, right? They say, it's my pleasure. How does that happen? How do you get 17-year-olds who would never say that at home to say that at work? You tell me, how does that happen? How do you create a business model where, when you're not directly involved in it, because Khai, you've sort of described that from your perspective, right? As a coach and as the rainmaker and the face of the company. But if you were talking to somebody right now, let's talk to a loan originator, somebody who's in a low rate environment, it's very busy, the calls are coming in, suddenly they're facing the same problem that your baker faced, right? How do you help them begin to go down that E-Myth path of the Mcdonaldization or Chick-fil-Aization of their business?
Well, when I first read the E-Myth, it was a great book, and then I would tell people to read it, but sometimes people don't read it or they can't conceptualize it. So I figured out another shortcut to it.
Nice.
Okay.
I love that.
I'm going to share my screen really quickly, because I'm going to show you first this graph, and then I'm going to show you what the shortcut is. Okay?
So for those of you listening right now on iTunes or anywhere where you get your podcast, check us out on YouTube, All In with Coach Bill Hart, and you will find this on YouTube. Or Khai, how else could they get this? Just on your website?
this graph is actually on my website, KhaiMcbride.com,
There you go.
KhaimCbride.com. It's on the homepage. And what this graph is it's a visual depiction of the stages that business owners go through in building the stages. And this is something that, oh, hang on a second here. Okay. And this is something that every business goes through. It doesn't matter whether you are Amazon or McDonald's or a loan originator or a financial planner, you're going to go through this.
Yep.
So businesses go through 4 stages. They go through infancy, adolescence, adult, and maturity. Okay. So as I'm explaining this, I want you to ask yourself out there, whoever's listening or watching, is which stage are you in? So in the infancy stage, your primary thoughts are survival, because you're bringing in business for the very first time. You have to bring in enough business to pay the bills. And so of course you're obsessed with lead generation, creating referral partners, and some time management just to get you to focus on doing those things. Okay. Once you get a little bit of a role and you start to figure things out and you're getting a little bit more business, you then move into the adolescent stage. But then you start to realize you have some growing pains because it's a little bit too much for you to handle for the first time. And just think about being an adolescent in the world. It's like you're not a child anymore. You're asking me to start to be responsible. And hey, dude, this is a little heavy, right? That's like what a teenager would say.
Sure.
And then what happens is that after that, you start to have some real success as an adult. And then from there, your business comes in, okay? And then eventually you get to the maturity stage where you've really figured out life, you really figured out the business, you become a market leader. But herein comes the challenges, okay? So in the infancy stage, it's survival, it's creating leads. Here's what happens in the adolescent stage of business and in life. In that stage, that's when you're supposed to learn things like systems, processes, rules, ethics, and morals, and responsibility, which teenagers, adults, and business owners do.
Yep.
But how many business owners and how many teenagers don't learn that?
Totally.
So by the time they become an adult, by the time you become a mature business, how many 25-year-olds do you know that don't even know how to do their laundry, don't even know how to pay bills?
Oh.
And how many business owners do you know that don't know how to lead, hire, and don't have any processes for their business? Sure. So what you have is you have this adult business that never created the systems and processes to be successful. So you have to take a step back. Okay, it would be like if you went to karate school and it's like, I understand you know how to fight, but I'm going to put you back in like yellow belt territory to learn the basics of footwork because you're just not fundamentally sound.
Right.
And what I find is a lot of people that come to me, no matter, I mean, if you come to me and you're in the infancy stage, then yeah, we got to work on just sales and survival and marketing and everything like that. But if you're coming to me at adolescence or an adult, well, if you're at adolescence, that's what I'm working with you on. And a lot of times people come to me at adult stage because they didn't learn the adolescence part.
That's right.
The systems and the processes and everything else. And even creating my business, it was the same way. When I started hiring coaches, I had to create systems for them, because if I didn't, I would have 3 coaches out there and all this business, and then it would be mayhem. And there's no way you can reach stage 4 maturity without that. Now, I know some people that do, because demand is so high. Maybe you're such a good entrepreneur, you create this demand. But here's what it's like. Your team's all over the place. Leadership is shot. People hate you. You're working too many hours. You're messing up orders because you didn't go in sequence. And,
yeah, that is
what
so
you learn
good,
in stage 3 is leadership.
Yep.
Leadership is really part of stage 3, because when you get to 4, now you've got this huge company, you've got this huge team, but you haven't learned to lead, and you haven't learned to create culture. And when you look at a mature business, it has everything from systems to demand the business, but it also has culture. The greatest businesses have culture, and that's what you learn in stage 3.
Sure.
And so in dissecting your business, I think that there's sometimes too much emphasis on just creating money and creating sales and creating marketing. Yeah. But, you know, NBA players make a ton of money, and like half of the time they're not all with it, you know, as human beings too. So that is the proper sequence. So I'm going to give you the cheat sheet now.
Please. Because
now that when I usually tell people to read E-Myth, and it's going to be this. Go on Amazon Prime and watch this movie, The Founder.
Oh,
Michael
I love
Keaton.
You call
it's
this
about
out.
the McDonald's story.
It is my, can I tell you what I love about this? And maybe you're going to talk about it. Oh, you do. I can see it's 3 slides down. I'll just let you talk. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. If you want to understand this concept more than anything, if you want to understand the E-Myth more than anything, Go to Amazon Prime, $3.99, watch the founder, and every single one of you out there have time in quarantine. So if you don't have time in quarantine, then you're lying to yourself. Okay, to be fair, some of you are trying to homeschool your kids, and so maybe you don't have time. So lock yourself in a bathroom with your laptop and watch this for like 2 hours. It's a really fun movie. Yep. So here's the thing about McDonald's, and I always was curious about this. Why is the founder of McDonald's named Ray Kroc? It's not called Kroc Burger. Right. Well, here's the story. He was a shake salesman, and he ran into this little fast food restaurant. I think it was in San Bernardino, Riverside, California, called McDonald's. It was a one restaurant operation. And what they did better than everybody else was they had a better way of business. They had systems and processes. They invented fast food. And that new way also changed the experience. So think about the way Amazon, the way Zappos not only created this process, but it changed the way you look at buying things. And here's the thing about that. They meticulously focused on creating that process. There's a scene in the movie where they sit in a tennis court and they're drawing chalk and they're saying, well, what if the shake machine was here? And what if the fries machine is here? And if I walk from fries to shake, will I bump shoulders into somebody? So think about, do you think Amazon has looked at their production line, their distribution line, and said, okay, well, if we do this first, what would it look like? If you're a loan originator, have you ever laid out your entire loan process and says, who does what first? And if I hand it to you, right? Totally. If you're a financial planner, have you ever thought about from the first time I meet with somebody, what's the second meeting? What's the third meeting? What is all that? Or maybe you do it on a manufacturing company, but it was that attention to detail.
Oh, it's genius. Mattered. This is actually my favorite scene in the movie. And, you know, it's shot from a crane or a drone or something from above. But if you recall, and I know you do, but they are bumping into each other in the beginning. And so he kind of does it, and he recreates their system. Their system actually was not scalable. It was not as scalable as it could be. And so he actually perfected this system. I use this example all the time because he takes something that for us is an experience that we think is just sort of, you know, tied together with baling wire and tape, and he standardized it. So to me, that's my favorite scene in this whole movie. I love that you're calling this out.
So what Ray Kroc did was so there's a scene in the movie where back in those days, it was the car hop restaurants where you would pull up and then the roller skating car girl would come up and deliver your food. And they emphasize how bad the service was. Well, here was McDonald's. What they did was they perfected the service and they perfected the process. And so Ray Kroc says, wait, this is so great. I can grow this. I can grow this because it's repeatable and it's scalable. That's the key. You can't grow your business if it's repeatable, if it's not repeatable, if it's not scalable. And what has McDonald's come over the years? It's become this billion-dollar corporation. I mean, I know fast food has changed over the years, but it's still the most successfully run company. And here's the thing, it's run by high school level kids. Right. That just come in. Here's my joke about McDonald's. You and I right now, Bill, we can go grab a 6-pack of Stella, which is like your beer. I love my beer. Man. We can break into a McDonald's at midnight. Yep. And we can find a manual, and the two of us can cook perfect Big Macs because it's laid out for us. And so, do you have a manual? Do you have a process for your business? Okay. So back to this slide to emphasize. Yep. So what it was that most restaurants, they start out and they're in this infancy stage, and then they go here and you see these mom and pop restaurants and they struggle. But McDonald's didn't struggle because they created processes. So then what Ray Kroc did was he saw the process and said, hey, now I can actually grow you. I can grow you over here, and I can franchise you. And he perfected it even more to grow. And what took them from adult to maturity? When they started saying, okay, well, we're bigger than burgers and fries. I mean, we're going to have Happy Meals. We're going to have toys. And Amazon went through the same thing. You know, your typical website that sells things, there were a lot of websites, but Amazon said, wait a second, I have to look at the distribution process. So one of the most brilliant things that they did was they created a partnership with UPS. And then they started figuring out the distribution line. And then Amazon, you know, and then from there, they said, now we can grow because it's a better experience and we can do things faster. Totally. They went to adult, and how they went to maturity is when they said, we're bigger than books. We're gonna dominate the opportunity in the landscape. Right. And I get super, it's a very cliche word, but I get super fired up about this because when you really think about this, the possibilities in business and growing your business, it's infinite. There's so much out there, but there's a particular sequence and a particular path. And what I can tell you is that it's your business model that's going to make you successful. Just like, look, you were raised different in a different environment than I was, and I was raised different and just as people.
Sure.
But if you properly show us how to take care of ourselves, give us boundaries, ethics, morals, and rules, then we become better adults. The rules are going to be a little bit different, but the fact that we were given rules and processes is what makes us good adults. And those rules and processes need to be in your business. And that is the big explosion.
I stepped on you there at the end. I want to make sure people hear the last thing you said. What's the last thing that you said?
Oh, I was just saying that it's the rules and the systems that allow you to really grow and thrive, whether it's as a person, whether it's a business, or maybe you just want to get into better shape. If you don't create some type of routine and processes and rules, you can't accelerate that.
Yeah. I love that, man. I'm glad I came back to it because I missed it. And I wanted to make sure that everybody caught what you said. Jocko says discipline equals freedom, right? Which was originally Aristotle. I think it was one of the Stoics that said it a different way. But that's surprising to people when they first hear it. It's like, well, wait a minute, you're saying rigid discipline creates freedom? Like, how do I go from a chain around a box to butterflies and ponies? And his point is, if I'm disciplined in my finances, it gives me the freedom to invest. Like right now, there will be great deals, whether it's stock or a classic car that you want to buy or whatever, right? It's like there's discipline there. If I'm disciplined in my fitness, I have the ability to climb Machu Picchu, which I probably wouldn't do if I was 100 pounds overweight. So I think that's what you're saying. And that's the beauty of what you bring, Khai, which, by the way, is not what I bring to coaching. You and I talked about that earlier, that, I love that focus that you have on systems. One of the things that I downloaded when I went to your site was that checklist, right? And I told you, when I look at an Excel spreadsheet, I am telling you, and I'm not kidding you, my eyes go out of focus. Because of the way that I'm wired naturally. And then before we started recording, I pulled out a checklist and you said, hey, wait a minute, you are a checklist guy. And it's like, well, but here's what I learned. What I learned in my 20s when I was learning to fly is I could just hop into an airplane and not use a checklist, but I never would have made it to 30, right? Because I didn't check the fuel. I didn't know if there was a bird nest built into the rudder. It's like, so I recognize the value of those systems, Khai, but I don't have a natural inclination there. So I'd love to, as we move towards wrapping up the interview, how have you learned as a coach to help people who don't have your natural wiring system, who are immediately coming alongside you saying, oh, I totally see that, I totally get that, like it's a struggle for them. How do you help them to understand that the very thing that you just described is precisely what they need to be more free in their gifting?
I think a lot of it is again the mindset of an entrepreneur, because I think that when people think about checklists and processes, they assume that you have to be like this sort of mechanical, detailed person.
Right.
It's just more of understanding that it's important to your business.
Yeah.
So like for you, I'm not asking you to be that super detailed, caught in the weeds person, but it's important to you that so before we did this, before we started recording, Bill said, I don't like checklists. And then he pulls up this checklist of 8 things that needed to happen.
I never said I didn't like a checklist. I never said I didn't like a checklist.
Oh, no, your eyes glazed over, right?
Yeah. I said Excel spreadsheets make my eyes go out of focus.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
But how you made that checklist was either you realized the importance of it, so you did it, or I bet you downloaded it someplace, right? Because
I'll tell you where it happened, and people will relate to this. I interviewed a guy that was a former CIA operative when I first put this podcast together, Tom Pecora, and I got about 20 minutes into it, and I wasn't recording it. And I had to stop him. And dude, it's Jack Ryan. I'm thinking he could take me out. Like if he's pissed right now, I'm in serious trouble. Fortunately, he was very gracious about it. But I thought at that moment, it's like, okay, that'll never happen again. My point simply is, I don't love telling that story, but sometimes the need for a checklist comes out of extreme pain.
Yes, yes. And the first time I created the checklist, you know, I think a lot of times people see the end result
Yeah.
and they don't realize that all it really is just, at first you could go about your business and then just write down what you do. Okay. And just say, okay, so what do I normally do? And just sit and write it down. You don't have to design the perfect business. I think there's an overemphasis of just sitting down and designing this perfect business. No, just do what you do and write it down. And then every time you improve something, change that list. And every time you make a mistake, change the list or alter the list. My loan process, if you're in the loan business, is 171 steps, but it started out as 30. And I just kept adding things and adding things. And people said, well, you know, they said, well, you know, it's intimidating and all that stuff. And it's like, yeah, but that took time. And then they said, well, does it have to be that long? And I says, well, if it's not long, you're memorizing the rest. That's
right.
The thing.
Exactly.
You see, the thing is that you're really doing all of those things. It's just, are you choosing to memorize it or are you choosing to have it written down? And my analogy there is
talking about that a lot right now. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He, you know, Tom, you know, it's interesting right now, Tom Ferry and him directing people to pivot. A lot of that is very systems oriented too.
Totally is.
Right.
Yeah.
And my analogy for that is that
historically. Yeah.
Right. No, not his personality.
Right.
And my example of that is that if you were cooking a Thanksgiving dinner and you went to the supermarket to buy the ingredients, what are the chances that you could pick up all the ingredients by memory? You have 0% chance that you would get everything correct. So what do? You say, well, like if you're going to go to the market and you're going to get two things, do you need a checklist? Nope, I'm going to go get two things. But once there's more than 5 things, what do you naturally do? Well, I'm going to make a grocery list.
Yep.
Right? I'm going to write some things down. And that's really what it is. When you get to a point where it gets overwhelming, you have to start to write things down.
Yeah, man.
And that matters. But that is the key to the rest. And I have this list that I created. Let me show you what it is.
You bet.
There are 5 resources you can use and 5 steps to creating that success.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You have processes, technology, people, money, and time.
Yep.
A lot of people will use technology to better their business. They'll use people to better their business, but without processes first, everybody's disorganized, right? And technology is generally cheaper and more automated than people. And what we're trying to protect is money and time, because money and time is last. And time is even more important than money. So if you can do 1, 2, and 3 for free, cool. If you can't, then you got to dip into money, then grab your money and go back to 1, and then 2, and 3, and then 4. But really protect your time.
So good, man.
And you can tell even the way that I think everything is like a process.
No, I love it, man.
It's how I learn and think.
Yeah. No, I love that you do. By the way, your mentor, Bill Hillestead, I always refer to as the smartest guy I know. You know, I tell people about Hillestead. It's like I said, it's as though if you sat down with a genius and he gave you something that was like the size of a ping pong ball, and he said, if you focus on that, I can make you a millionaire. But what Hillestead does, and I've told him this, is he backs up a dump truck with 1,000 ping pong balls and dumps them all over your head, right? And so it's the person that is able to take 1 or 2 of those and really execute what Gino Wickman calls the integrator, right? You've got to have that integrator that allows you to take those great ideas and then make that happen. And really, I think that's what you guys do really well. So one final question for you.
Gino Wickman wrote the book Traction, right? Is that Gino Wickman?
He did.
Traction. I love that book.
That's
great definitely book. Another book for everybody to read.
The really funny part about that is his dad was Floyd Wickman, who's still alive. I say was, but you know, he sort of had his heyday. He was the Mike Ferry, Tom Ferry's dad, in the real estate industry of the East Coast. He was in Detroit and he created a program called Sweat Hogs. And Gino is his son. So it's like they know our world. It's like everything's connected, man. Kevin Bacon had nothing on us. Here's my final question for you. And it's one you're not prepared for, so I hope it doesn't catch you off guard, but you're a smart guy and you'll be able to do this. I know that you just recently lost your dad, and I'm horribly sorry about that. I know what it's like, and there's nothing quite like that moment. But the reason that I bring it up, Khai, first of all, you did such a beautiful job of creating a tribute to your dad online, and I think it really helps people right now to be able to see that and maybe take some things that could be taken for granted and look at it a little differently. But my question to you is, when you talk about, you know, the way that you were raised and what you learned, I know that your dad instilled in you a love of sports for sure. Somebody who's listening to us right now cannot see that you're wearing a Lakers t-shirt. And I know you have enormous respect for Kobe. But if there were just one or two things that immediately come to your mind that you think, man, let me tell you what my dad left me with. How would you answer that? What did your dad instill in you as a young boy that is now present in you as a man?
What's interesting about that question is that what you choose to learn from your parents can be, everything is about a filter, and how you filter life, and what filter you choose to see life as.
Yeah.
And when I look at my dad's death, I mean, here's the thing, is that he did die from COVID-19, which for some people can sound really, really tragic. But here's the reality. He was suffering from dementia.
Yeah.
And that's even more tragic in my eyes. And so I filtered it this way. Dementia killed my dad. COVID freed him from the pain.
Wow.
And so it's just the filter that you look in life. And so here's the thing about parents too. My dad wasn't a perfect person. There were a lot of things that he was just being human. But I chose to filter the good things and learn the good things.
Nice.
One of the things that I said to people is that my dad was the greatest example of the first business owner that I knew, and inspired me to be an entrepreneur. But he was a horrible business person. So I kind of did all the things that he didn't do.
Nice.
Right?
Nice.
We love sports. He likes UCLA. I like USC. Again, love of sports, different teams. But the most important thing, and you know, my dad is very much like Bill Hillestead, just this crazy genius. And I had to filter everything and create sequence to it. And so the lesson there for me was not just the things that he taught me, but what did I extract out of it? And what did I filter? Because in life, there's so many people, there's so many things that give you information. And a lot of times what we do is, if it doesn't meet our rigid filter, we throw it out. But what I did with my parents, and it's the running joke with my sister, I said, how can our parents have been so messed up and we turned out really, really great?
Right.
And we say that jokingly because they were actually really, really, really great parents. But I looked at everything that my dad stood for, and the things that were great, they shaped me. The things that weren't great, they shaped me. And it was just that ability. But I think the thing that he taught me the most, and my mother, is that they always believed in me, and they always supported me. And they always said, you can do whatever you're capable of doing everything. But here's the thing. They never said I was capable because of the way, sort of like I hate to pick on a generation, but like the younger generations, they're being coddled too much. And they say, oh, you're a great person, yet they don't have a job. Like let's not do fake coddling. Right. My mom was the Asian discipline, do it, structure. So she was like the McDonald's brother, and my dad was like Ray Kroc, and he said, and if you do what your mother said, you can have everything that you want in life. Wow. And that mentality between the two, I'm like the living McDonald's. I had the structure in my mom, and I had the possibility in my dad. My dad allowed me, my mom was a little bit more rigid, you know, if things weren't good, she'd be a little bit hard on me. But my dad was always like, you just got to filter, you got to filter it in a certain way. And I even filtered it with them. I mean, my mom, so many great things, especially about the whole like discipline and stuff like that. But some things I would never raise my kids that way.
Sure. I get it. Well, and by the way, I see on social, I've not met your girls, but I see on social what they're into and how you parent and how you connect with them. And I know that you're creating great humans there, Khai, and I want to hand it to you. But I love your answer. I love your answer about my dad wasn't perfect. My best man at my wedding, who was really my mentor, I talk about him in my book, Harold, once told me there's a very famous guru that anybody would know. And I was enamored by him about 25, 30 years ago. And I was talking to somebody that had worked with him, and they were giving me sort of the real story right behind the curtain. And I was so disappointed. And I was mentioning this to my mentor, and he said these words to me that were so powerful. He said, never let the walk of the, what was it? Never let the walk of the, whoever it was, the person affect the truth, the message, the messenger. That's what it was. Never let the walk of the messenger affect the truth of the message. Right. And that's kind of what you're saying, I think, with your dad. Like, maybe he wasn't perfect, but there were some lessons in there. Sometimes the opposite, like you and I have learned in golf. If I stand behind you and I watch your putt and it breaks right, I'm like, wow, didn't see that. I'm going to go the other way. Right. So sometimes we can learn much from what you don't want to do is what you do want to do, and then what your mom brought in as well. And I can tell you this, man, your parents made a pretty remarkable human, and I am glad to know you, Khai. And I'm really, really glad we got to do this today. And I know you've helped some people. I know we've mentioned your website a couple of times. It's pretty easy to find somebody on social, but what would you say to them if they're like, man, I want more of this? Where would you drive them? What's the best way for them to find you?
Two ways. If you're in the loan industry and you want to learn about me, go to my website, KhaiMcbride.com, KhaiMcbride.com. But if you just want to interact with me and get to know me, then friend me on Facebook. I'm the only Khai McBride in the world, so I'm not very hard to find. Follow me on Facebook, follow me on Instagram. And I will warn you, and everybody knows this, but that I don't actually post a lot of business things because I'm about the relationship. Let's get to know each other as people. And I think that people like my humor and my love of sports and my love of life, because that's how you really connect with people. Totally. To then want to go deeper, because that's all about the culture of who I'm working with. And I think that when you connect with people on a moral, ethical, even interest level, then you can work with them on a deeper level.
Yeah, man.
And
totally agree.
That's how you find me on social, Instagram, Facebook, and my website. Everything's Khai McBride. It's cool. Pretty simple. I remember growing up, it was like, growing up in America, it's like, I wanted like a simple name, like Mike or something. And I had Khai, and now I'm like, it's the most unique name ever. I love it. It's like the best branding name.
It totally is. Totally is. Well, buddy, it's been great hanging with you. Thanks for sharing what you believe, and continued success to you moving forward. And I hope there's a round of golf in our very near future.
Absolutely. What a great journey the two of us have been through. And we'll do the same thing on my show, on my side as well too, because there's just so much we can learn from each other. And there was one other thing. If there was one thing that my dad learned, which the two of us have, is at the end of the day, he was a helper. That's what he wanted to be. And I think that that's why I have that in me, to help people.
Yeah,
and
you totally
want to help people. And as leaders, that's what we do. Don't be the leader that is just so single-minded and you just want to get work done and you want your people to get work done. Like, look at your organization, your culture, and help people.
Yeah, look at the humans.
And I appreciate this, Bill.
Yeah, man. My pleasure, bud. Take care.